Welcome, everybody. I'm going to just give it another minute or two before we get started. Thanks for joining. Okay, with the interest of time, I'm going to get started. Thanks for joining our Thinking Thursday today on Meal Pattern Basics. I'm Christy Hegner. I'm one of the CACFP consultants here, or Child and Adult Care Food Program. And I'm going to go off camera just so it's less distracting to see myself speak at the camera. Okay, some quick housekeeping items. Everyone's muted during this presentation. However, if you look at the bottom of the Zoom presentation, you'll see the chat box and a Q&A box. Please enter any questions you have in the Q&A section. It makes it easier for us to view your questions. The chat is going to be where our Secretary is going to add links throughout the presentation so we can keep those separated from your questions. Melissa Lonsberry's on as well to help answer any questions throughout the training for me as well. So thanks for joining. From now on, our trainings are going to be posted on our website, the full recording of them. We are going to start implementing that this month, so it'll be much easier. So if you have colleagues or that want to view this one and we're able to make it, or you want to view previous months' trainings, it'll be much easier for you to view the videos versus just the PowerPoint deck that we used to that we have uploaded currently. And then here's the web address, which you'll see in the chat as well, to where to find our other trainings for the past year. We do have a new way to receive certificates that I'll show you at the end of the webinar. We've implemented that, I believe, the last month or two. It's a pretty simple way to receive your certificate. And then in our newsletters, we'll be giving you the exact date for our upcoming Thinking Thursdays as well. Okay, this is one of my favorite parts. I like to know, because we're virtual and I can't really see you, but I'd like to know where you guys work. So a poll should be popping up soon. Just let us know who we're talking to. So click on the one that best fits your organization. I know we have a small group, so this shouldn't even take much time. Got a couple of child care centers so far. Well, that might be it. Okay, so all child care centers. So now I know the audience I'm speaking to. It's great. Okay, moving on. Okay, today's learning objectives include understanding the basics of the CACFP meal pattern components, as well as understanding the importance of meeting these specific meal pattern requirements, and then being able to identify credible meal pattern components for our CACFP. And I'll be going into detail about each of these coming up. So the purpose of the CACFP meal pattern has a couple of purposes. Knowing that we've had the shift from quite a while ago now with updates to these meal patterns, they were revised to better align with the dietary guidelines for Americans. Now, you may recognize this, that new dietary guidelines came out just recently. As at this moment, nothing has changed with the CACFP meal patterns, but we anticipate changes happening sooner than later. And as soon as those changes come out and the guidance for us, we will disseminate that information as soon as we have it. However, currently, the standard is following what we've been following over the past. What I'm going to discuss now is no changes at the moment. But the reasons that we have these specific meal patterns, they help children develop healthy eating patterns early in life, as well as safeguard the overall well-being of our adult participants. So it's pretty important. Now, regarding nutrition standards for these meals and snacks, there's several regulations that we have to follow, and they can be found on this website. We highly suggest you bookmark it. This USDA website is very valuable, as well as our own MDE website, where we have several resources as well. But I wanted to point out this one at the beginning, because when there are updates, this will probably be one of the first pages that is updated as well. Here are 3 different charts for meal patterns. So these are USDA's. You can find all the portion sizes, the different food groups, food components, food items on here. These are available on that website as well. Please review these if you are not familiar with them. It goes into a lot of detail, but I will be discussing them throughout this presentation as well. Keeping in mind that you must provide the minimum meal requirements of each of these components. But of course, an individual child or adult may choose to eat less or more if you do offer, say, family-style meal service. So when it comes to the different age groups that CACFP focuses on, well, as you can see, pretty much all of them, including infants. However, we will not be going over infants in this presentation today because they have their own separate requirements based on their own unique nutritional needs. So the various age groups that we will discuss today are toddlers, ages 1 to 2. And then we have 3 to 5-year-olds, which typically we call preschoolers. And then we have the school age, 6 to 12 and 13 to 18-year-olds. Now, the older age group was added to better reflect the populations that we serve at our programs, such as the at-risk after-school programs, as well as emergency shelters. Now, we also have participants who are 60 years and older, or even 18 years and older, who are functionally impaired individuals. And these are participants who are enrolled in adult day services during the day. So these adults do not include staff members of your program who would be eating with children and working with children. Now here's a look at the breakfast, lunch, and supper and snack meal components that are required for each of those meals or snacks. I will go into more detail, but this is just an overview of what food components are required in each one. One thing I wanted to point out is for flexibility, which is nice. It's been utilized for a while now, is the asterisk, as you see under fruit within the lunch and supper category. You are allowed to serve 2 vegetables at lunch and supper instead of a vegetable and a fruit. You cannot serve 2 fruits and no vegetables, though. So this is only, you can replace that 1 fruit with a vegetable, meaning you can serve 2 different vegetables. Now here's a bit more detail that we go into with the 5 required meal pattern components. As you can see, milk, fruit, vegetable, grains, and then meat alternates. These just kind of give you a breakdown, a little bit of the variety that you can have within each category, which I'll go into more detail coming up here. So we'll first start with milk. This is a topic that is sometimes challenging to centers. We'll start off with toddlers. Toddlers ages 12 months to 23 months, or up through 2 years. They should only be offered whole unflavored white milk, unless, of course, there's dietary restrictions. And then for children beginning at age 2 through age 5, should only be offered skim, which is fat-free, or 1% unflavored white milk. Now, the part that changes is when children are age 6 through adults. You can, of course, provide the unflavored skim or 1%, but you are also allowed to provide flavored skim milk for these age groups only. Never under the age of 6 is flavored milk allowed. And then milk such as lactose-free is appropriate for any age. You do not need a doctor's note for that. And we do have a dietary preference request form that you can fill out and should have completed by the parents or the family member to show that that is a preference for the child or individual. And of course, breast milk is allowed at any age. We do have a nice resource, the Serving Milk in the CACFP, which goes into a little more detail as well about milk requirements. When it comes to milk substitutions, they must be nutritionally equivalent to cow's milk. And this is because we want to make sure it provides the specific nutrients, such as protein, calcium, several vitamins and minerals that are found in cow's milk. Now, if those substitutions do not meet the meal pattern requirement, then you will need to request a doctor's note, and that will be required to be on file before you can credit that meal with that milk substitution. In doing so, we have a special diet request form that you can use as well, and that is on our website. It's used to be called the special diet statement. Same thing, just it's organized a little bit better. You're welcome to use your own form as long as it still has the information that ours does. As you can see, this is also a new handout we have on the screen that it was put together with school nutrition side as well. It shows all the credible and non-credible, it actually gives credible milk substitution examples as well. Okay, everyone likes a quiz, don't you? We're going to have a couple questions pop up on the screen. Go right ahead and answer those questions as I read through them. So, can you serve chocolate milk to toddlers and preschool age children? Yes or no? Second question is, milk can be allowed to be poured over cereal or into a glass. True or false? And then number 3, non-dairy beverages may not have the same level of nutrients as fluid, should say cow's milk. True or false? Okay, looks like everyone's answered. We'll end the poll. Looks like everyone is paying attention. So, can you serve chocolate milk to toddlers and preschool age children? Definitely not. That would be flavored milk, and that is not allowed. Can you pour milk over cereal or into a glass? Of course. So either is acceptable. And then non-dairy beverages may not have the same level of nutrients as fluid milk. That is correct. True. Great job, everybody. Okay, moving along. Now on to meat and meat alternates. When it comes to these are essential for good health, this food component, because they contain protein and nutrients that provide basically allowing your body to build strong bones, muscles, and healthy skin. So it's definitely an important food component. Foods like lean meats, chicken, fish, eggs, yogurt, tofu. As you can see, there's several that fall into this category. You can also see the link that was just posted in our chat about lots of detail into a team nutrition resource that you feel free to view later. One thing I want to touch on, which I will discuss later, is a meat alternate is required at lunch or supper. However, it can also be an option for breakfast. And we will talk about a little more in detail right now about that. So previously, serving meats and meat alternates at breakfast was optional and they did not credit as a part of a reimbursable meal. However, we have gotten for a greater variety and flexibility when planning the breakfast menu. These updates now allow a meat or meat alternate to be served in place of grains at breakfast up to 3 times per week. So, for example, you serve a cheese omelet with fruit and milk. The omelet would credit as the meat or meat alternate, and then that may replace the entire grains component requirement. So you do not need to serve an additional grain for that meal to be reimbursable. And then as long as you serve 2 other food components, the vegetable or fruit and milk, you have met that requirement. So it's been around a little while now, but in case you're not familiar with it, there's new added sugar limits for yogurt. That began at the beginning of this fiscal year. And yogurt must contain no more than 12 grams of added sugar per 6 ounces. And I love this handout because it's really easy to figure out if the yogurt qualifies or not, or is creditable. This is one of USDA's many handouts. This one's under the choose yogurt that is lower in added sugars handout or worksheet, they call it. There's also another one labeled calculating the added sugars limit for yogurt in the child and adult care food program. So you're welcome to use either one. This one's a little simpler because most of the serving sizes of what you'll be providing your participants is on this list. And you can easily see whether the yogurt exceeds the added sugar limit or is below it. So it's pretty simple to use this handout. Speaking of added sugar, I also have a Thinking Thursday specifically on added sugars for breakfast cereals and yogurt. So if you want more details on that, you're welcome to check out that Thinking Thursday. I'm going to go into a few examples of common foods that are served and that are sometimes confusing to individuals, whether they credit or not. So the first example is imitation cheese and cheese products. These we see fairly often. They are not creditable. It's processed cheeses like Velveeta, not creditable. This is one with a common misconception because I think it's enough cheese product. It does not count. However, there are ways to credit mac and cheese. So, one of the favorites of children. Ideally, in my opinion, you have a homemade recipe. That way you know exactly what's going in it. Using a standardized recipe, which you will hear me say fairly often today. Or if you do have a pre-made or boxed recipe, adding extra cheese and making sure you know how much cheese is added to that recipe or that box could also allow that meal to be credited. But you have to be careful and make sure you still have a standardized recipe to make sure you are providing enough of the meat alternate, being the cheese, to that food to credit, as well as the grain, if you want the grain to credit for how many the proper portion for the noodles to be served. Another item that it's not always credible, our processed meats. So processed meats such as salami, sausage, excuse me, beef jerky, these tend to contain byproducts, binders, extenders, like fillers, basically. They're generally high in sodium and saturated fat. So ideally, we want to limit them anyway to no more than one serving per week. To be able to make sure they credit, you need to request a child nutrition label or CN label, or a product formulation statement or PFS. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, that's okay. We also have a Thinking Thursday on this that I just gave last month on product labels and how to find those labels for products. It's a little trickier if you're a childcare center. You don't necessarily purchase from large vendors, but it is possible to find labels. Okay, now how about alternate protein products? These include foods with soy protein isolate or whey protein concentrate. Typically, they're found in processed meat alternate products like in patties or nuggets that are trying, like that resemble, say, a chicken nugget, but it's a soy chicken nugget. You will also be required to produce a CN label or product formulation statement. And these are great. Here's an example up on the screen of a CN label. It will provide you what the food equates to. So it will show you, like say this, for this example, this is not a, this is an actual chicken recipe, but just, or chicken CN label, but just for the example, it shows that it provides 1.5 ounces of equivalent meat, 1 ounce equivalent grain, and a 1/4 cup of green vegetable, 1/4 cup of red orange vegetable, and other vegetables. So it gives you a lot of information, exactly what you need to know, whether it credits or not. So CN labels are extremely beneficial to have for products and are necessary when they're processed. Another one that comes up a lot is combination foods. And I talked a little bit about this, but combination foods are ones with 2 or more meal components, such as macaroni cheese or pizza, meat sauce, chicken nuggets. The chicken nuggets, you might think, oh, it just counts as a protein or a meat. But however, you can sometimes count the breading on there. And some will credit towards a grain component or a partial grain component. But keeping in mind, they might not have enough to meet the full requirement, whether it be grain or meat alternate. They again require a child nutrition label or a product formulation statement. And if they are homemade combination foods, you definitely need a standardized recipe for those foods. Okay, on to vegetable and fruit components. So according to the dietary guidelines for Americans, and we probably know this ourselves, most Americans do not consume enough fruits or veggies. Also, when people do eat them, they're often prepared with added things like salt, sugar, fat. So our CACFP meal pattern requirements focus on increasing nutritious vegetables and fruit in the diet by requiring them for meals and encouraging them for snacks. As a registered dietitian, I love seeing fruits and vegetables served at snack time, even though we know kids would love the crackers. However, introducing them to a variety of fruits and vegetables at a young age, especially, is wonderful. So some things to think about when you're planning menus is adding a variety of fruits and veggies. It not only broadens the children's palate and just exposure, but also gives them more variety of nutrients, because every fruit and veggie has different nutrients in them. We do not, with CACFP, require vegetable subgroups like schools do. However, it's recommended to serve a variety, such as dark green veggies, red and orange vegetables, starchy vegetables, a variety every week. Now, of course, you can choose all forms of vegetables and fruit, such as fresh or canned, frozen or dried. You can also serve juice. However, keep in mind that is not ideal since it does lack fiber compared to whole fruits and vegetables. So when it comes to menu flexibility, as I mentioned earlier, greater flexibility is great when it comes to serving meals. So you can offer a different vegetable instead of the fruit at lunch or supper. Keeping in mind, you cannot serve just two different fruits or two fruit servings. It has to be one fruit and one vegetable or two vegetables. You could always serve a vegetable at breakfast. That's a great way to get in another vegetable throughout the day. Or pair it with a favorite, with a favorite fruit or vegetable, along with maybe a new to the children type of vegetable. You never know until you try, given that children may not be exposed to a variety at home. It's fantastic when you can give a little bit of variety more at your school or center. I touched a little bit on juice, but to give a little more detail, so juice must be pasteurized, 100% juice to be served. Like I said, it does lack fiber that is found in whole fruits and typically is a major source of sugar. To reduce the amount of sugar in children's diets, the USDA has limited the amount of juice allowed in our program to one meal or snack per day. Keeping in mind that you cannot serve all liquids for a snack, so you can't serve just milk and juice. So you can serve one or the other with another food component. Ideally, we don't recommend serving milk at snack time or juice for that matter, but the milk, because it comes up fairly often that the center or school's not purchasing enough milk to allow for all the meals and snack. So it's advised or recommended to not serve milk at snack time anyway. But that's just a side note because we're seeing that a lot more when the analysts go out for administrative reviews. And then unfortunately that can lead to money being taken back because the milk is not enough or sufficient for the amount of enrolled children you have. Another thing about juice is if it's in the form of a smoothie, that counts as juice, like when it comes to like fruit or veggie purees. And as a reminder, juice is not allowed in the infant meal pattern if you do have infants in your care. Here's an overview of the grain component. As we all know, as discussed earlier, a grain is required component at breakfast, lunch, and supper, and is optional at snack time. Some of the changes, not really changes, but things to point out that have improved the grain component, let's say, is at least one serving of the grain served per day at your site must be whole grain rich. Keeping in mind, breakfast cereals must now meet the added sugar limits. Grain-based desserts absolutely do not credit towards the grain component or any component. Using the ounce equivalent to determine the amount of credible grains is one way to determine if the grain is credible towards the 1 ounce equivalent. Now, to be credible, they either must be whole grain, enriched, or include bran or germ. And then speaking of other Thinking Thursdays, I also have an entire whole grain Thinking Thursday that you will see uploaded soon with the full video. And then there's a lot more detail on them in the CACFP crediting handbook, which was just recently updated. Now, when it comes to documenting whole grains, we really want to see them on the menu. As you can see here by the example, WG is listed after some items, indicating that they are whole grain rich items. You're welcome to put whole wheat in front of bread items or whole rich. Any indication, any way you want to indicate it is great as long as we can identify those whole grain items easily. So when our analysts come out to conduct a review, you'll see they can easily identify those grains. Here's another great resource from USDA showing how to determine whether the grain is equal to an ounce equivalent. There's also several other resources, including other webinars and other additional worksheets besides this one on whole grains. They have quite a few resources as well that I wanted to point out. When it comes to breakfast cereals, so one major contributor to the grain component is often cereal. So, of course, both children and adults alike enjoy breakfast cereal. But so many contain high levels of added sugar, which presumably this is one reason the USDA decided to make the change to decrease the amount of added sugar in what is allowed in CACFP. So to help reduce it now, like I said, cereals, including ready-to-eat, instant, or regular hot cereals, must contain no more than 6 grams of added sugar per dry ounce. And you'll also see this resource again from USDA and how to determine whether your cereal meets the added sugar limit, similar to the added yogurt handout as well. Here's it's kind of zoomed in a little bit to show you an example of how to determine whether it meets the added sugar limit or not, or meets to equate to the lower than the added sugar amount. So this serving size, for example, 3/4 of a cup is 30 grams. And for that 30 gram serving, it includes 4 grams of added sugar. So then you'd look over in the chart, and for a 30 gram serving, it can't have more than 6 grams of added sugar. So for this cereal, this would qualify because it's 4 grams of added sugar is less than the 6 grams max. So that's just a mini example of how to determine whether it would meet the added sugar limit. And keep in mind that the formulas of cereals change over time. So when you buy this month, if you buy the same one in say 6 months, it could change. So just be aware of the person purchasing the food or serving the food knows how to look for these because they do change at times, unfortunately. Okay, here's a very common food that is served, maybe not at your centers, but at other centers, we see corn chips or tortilla chips served fairly often. And believe it or not all of them are creditable. So there's an excellent resource from Wisconsin that goes into detail about determining what type of corn chip is creditable. But I wanted to point out these 3 criteria and I have down so you could have an idea of what is creditable. And this is specifically just as a grain component. There's other requirements for if it's creditable as a whole grain item. So to credit as a grain, these 3 criteria, one of these must be met. So either the first ingredient is whole grain, and the second and third grains are non-creditable, such as corn or cornmeal. Or another option is if the first ingredient is an enriched corn ingredient, such as enriched corn or enriched corn flour, that would be creditable. Or the first ingredients are corn ingredients, and then nutrients are listed underneath that, such as corn flour. So I know it's a mouthful, but those are 3 options to look for when you're looking for creditable tortilla chips or corn chips. But again, that resource that from Wisconsin is excellent. So take a look if you're questioning whether your corn chips are creditable. If you're not familiar with the WIC food guide, it's an excellent resource, which you will see it posted in the chat as well, for creditable cereals. So every cereal listed in their book as of now is approved for our added sugar breakfast cereals. So they should all contain no more than 6 grams of added sugar per dry ounce. So if you choose cereals from their book, you can be confident that they meet the added sugar guidelines. However, something to note is the yogurt in the WIC guide do not all meet the added sugar requirements. So please be mindful of the yogurt. We're strictly speaking breakfast when it comes to the WIC food guide. One of my favorite topics is grain-based desserts. I say favorite because this has been a rule since 2017. Grain-based desserts have not been allowed in the child and adult care food program. Unfortunately, we still see them pop up. And when it comes to marketing, companies have gotten very creative in producing items that are very questionable whether they meet or are considered grain-based desserts or not. But when in doubt, please don't serve it or ask your analyst. Much better to serve fresh fruits and veggies or combinations of them, like we said, for snacks versus something that could be perceived as a grain-based dessert. They're typically full of added sugar and saturated fat. We consider them empty calories at times, and they're just overall not the best nutrient-dense food to offer your participants. Definitely a few resources we have on this topic, and it goes through, kind of gives you, as you can see, what would not be reimbursable and what is reimbursable when it comes to grain-based items. So, like I said in the last slide, when in doubt, don't serve it. So, for example, for breakfast, you can serve savory or plain versions of the product, like blueberry muffins or lower sugar items, cereals. You can serve baked oatmeal with fresh fruit in them. And then snack time. Please try out some different fruits or veggies. You could serve whole grain crackers with a bean dip, creditable corn chips with cheese or salsa. Yogurt and berries is a great snack. As you can see, there's several items that are options besides grain-based desserts. And yes, plain graham crackers and animal crackers are allowed. That one has been debated, but those 2 items, which are very preschool friendly, we know are allowed. Okay, we have one more quiz that's going to pop up on your screen. Promise it's short, it's only 3 questions. The first question is, CACFP requires 3 whole grain or whole grain rich items to be served each day. True or false? And number 2, you can serve plain graham crackers or animal crackers. So true or false? And number 3, you do not need a CN label or product formulation statement if you have a recipe. True or false? Okay, it looks like almost done answering. We'll give it another few seconds. Okay, we'll end the poll. So great job overall. The first one, CACFP requires 3 whole grain or whole grain rich items to be served each day. That is false. You only need to serve one whole grain item each day. The second question, you can serve plain graham crackers and animal crackers. True or false? That is true. And then the third, you do not need a CN label or product formulation statement if you have a recipe. That's sort of a tricky question. I would say that is false, given that likely the food in your recipe is maybe processed. So if it's a processed item, a meat or a grain, you will need a product formulation statement or child nutrition label to check for those items to see what they credit for. Okay. Briefly touch on water. This doesn't seem to be too much of an issue when it comes to having water offered throughout the day. Just be mindful, it must be offered and made available throughout the day. It cannot be served in place of milk, but you can offer alongside milk at meals or snacks, but have 2 different cups, of course. And then another resource we have from USDA as well about water. So I've touched on standardized recipes. So why do I keep bringing this up? Well, standardized recipes are fantastic. They are used to help you determine what you're serving. So a standardized recipe is something that's been tried, tested, and evaluated, and you can trust that it will provide you what it actually says. So for this example, the child nutrition recipe box from USDA has tons of variety of recipes available. As you can see on this turkey wrap and pinwheel, this one accounts for a 1/4 cup of vegetable, 1.5 ounces of meat or meat alternate, and 1.5 ounces of grain, if you follow that specific recipe along with the serving sizes, of course. So check it out. It's extremely helpful resource, especially if you want to get into more homemade recipes. This is highly recommended to use standardized recipes. So be aware, of course, that some foods can cause choking. So toddlers and infants eating table food cannot, of course, eat all the same foods as older children or the same sizes. So keeping in mind, you need to modify foods for children when either through cooking or chopping, grating. A lot of foods are adaptable, especially now that it's a lot of people are transitioning away from baby food and into table foods right away for infants. Keep this in mind on the forefront when you are starting to introduce foods to infants and toddlers. And of course, for older adults that have issues as well, perhaps chewing. One thing to point out when it comes to manufacturer products. So USDA does not review, approve, or endorse any product, nor do we at MDE. You may see vendor products and items stating things like CACFP approved. Please don't follow that. I know that's very confusing, but not all the foods that state that are actually approved. We have seen that label on items that are actually grain-based desserts. As you know, as we mentioned earlier, grain-based desserts are not allowed, even if they're whole grain rich. So be mindful, know what you're looking at. Do not take for granted if it says it's CACF approved that it actually is. So yes, that can be very tricky. Okay, we are almost done. I'm going to provide a few more resources. I know we've given you a lot, but you can always reference these later if you need to. Here's our website with all of our resources under meal and menu planning, such as the crediting tips sheets, grain-based desserts information, vegetarian diets, as well as crediting handbook, and lots more, as you can see. A few other resources here. The food buying guide is very valuable and very comprehensive, as well as the crediting handbook, which is the one on the right that I've been mentioning throughout today's webinar. It contains actually nice charts all throughout the handbook, whether a food is creditable or not, or even maybe. So some foods may fall into each one of those three categories. So, hey, last few resources are from the Institute of Child Nutrition. They have several webinars available as well as courses that are free for you. There's some quicker courses and lessons on all topics like meal patterns, menu planning, and there's the website posted in the chat as well. And then the National CACFP Association also has some free items such as sample menus and recipes and other professional development opportunities. And we are wrapping up today's training. Here is the certificate. If you want to scan the QR code and then you enter in this information, if it asks for your sponsor number, you can put 0. You do not need to put in your actual one to receive credit for this training. But the rest is as you can see on the screen, it's the title, date, presenter name, and you'll receive 1 hour of professional development hours for this. And then if the QR code doesn't work, you can use that link for the form as well. Doesn't look like we have any questions. I think I'll go to the next slide. Thanks so much for joining us. If you have any questions, here's our contact information, phone number and email. If you think of anything after this presentation or training, please let us know. We're happy to help, as well as your analysts. You're always welcome to reach out to them and are encouraged to do so with any questions you may have. So thank you, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. Bye, everybody.